was debating like actually giving myself a long weekend or making like a nice chill video for you guys today, but then
Prime Minister Carney in Canada caved to President Trump in the United States of America. And President Trump knows how to negotiate, and he knows that he is governing the best country and the best economy in this world, on this planet. And every country on the planet needs to have good trade relationships with the United States. And it was a mistake for Canada to vow to implement that tax. That would have hurt our tech companies here in the United States. The president made his position quite clear to the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister called the president last night to let the president know that he would be dropping that tax, which is a big victory for our tech companies and our American workers here at home.
So I guess we're here now. Let me tell you what happened here, what smarter people than me had to say about this when I spoke to them today, and why this is really mortifying for our country. I get that saying that might upset people, but it's just the reality. I'm sorry. Stick around and I'll tell you why. So first off, the digital services tax, or the DST as I'm going to call it in this video, was announced in 2020 to make sure that huge digital companies, I'm talking companies like Amazon, Apple, Google, Meta, Uber, and many more, actually pay taxes on revenues generated from Canadians. It was going to be a 3% tax on money these companies make from Canadian users and customers. And the first payments from these digital giants, yeah, they were supposed to start today. And given this tax is retroactive to 2022, these massive digital companies were set to pay the Canadian government about $2 billion US. But that's not happening anymore. Because on Friday, Trump threw a mantrum. And he said that because of our DST, which he called an egregious tax, the US is terminating, quote, all discussion on trade with Canada effective immediately. Then, at about 10 p.m. on this Sunday night of a long weekend, the day before those poor, beleaguered, broke boys like Jeff Bezos were gonna have to, God forbid, pay a little bit more tax to Canada, the Canadian government sent out a news release saying, quote, Canada would rescind the digital services tax in anticipation of a mutually beneficial comprehensive trade arrangement with the United States. Now, I want to briefly address two claims I'm seeing made about this. First, some folks are saying that the DST is only being paused, not removed. I think that might be because of the use of the term halted in this press release, but making that assumption is wrong. Because the rest of that sentence says, quote, the June 30th, 2025 collection will be halted, and Minister Champagne will soon bring forward legislation to rescind the Digital Services Tax Act. So yeah, it sounds like they're committing to fully repeal that legislation, which means if they go ahead with exactly what they say here, that puppy's gone. The other claim that I've seen people float is that this is actually all fine. It's totally cool that we are rescinding the DST because there's talk of a coming broader OECD agreement that looks to share taxing rights on large, profitable multinational companies with countries where their products are sold. People are pointing to this thing known as Pillar 1 of these OECD talks as making the DST redundant. And in theory, sure, but that's not in place. Like, our DST was supposed to be implemented in 2022. That's why it's currently retroactive to that year. But it kept being delayed because of promises about this OECD process being about to go ahead. Does that argument sound familiar? Like the one that we're hearing from people right now? Yeah. But Biden and Trump's teams kept obstructing this OECD process because, you know, broligarchy. And then in January, Trump basically pulled out of the whole thing. So yeah, there was no reason and continues to be no reason to think that this Pillar 1 thing is about to come through. That's why Trudeau went ahead and implemented the DST. And it's probably worth mentioning here that several other countries have their own DSTs in place, including the UK, which is also negotiating a trade deal with the US right now, just like us, but they haven't turned around and dropped theirs. Can someone please tell me why Carney is only willing to copy UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's shitty homework when it comes to awful stuff like AI? Can we not copy this one too? But no, Carney just chickened out. And that's why what creepy Caroline Leavitt had to say stung. Because she's not totally wrong for once. We kind of did cave. Paris Marks, a friend of the show, tech critic, host of the podcast Tech Won't Save Us, and several other phenomenal offerings, put it like this. The US tech industry is pressuring to remove digital services taxes. The US government is on board. They were poised to make 3-year backdated payments today and didn't want to, so they put pressure on Trump. He complied, and Carney folded. But, quote, the DST is necessary to make tech companies pay a fairer rate of tax in Canada and many other countries because the most important parts of the OECD tax deal are effectively dead. Paris is very smart and knows a lot more about this stuff than me or anyone else, and just wrote a piece today, so I really recommend you go check it out. I also contacted Keldon Bester, the executive director of the Canadian Anti-Monopoly Project, for this piece. He told me that, quote, regardless of what you think about the DST, this is disappointing from a negotiating perspective, adding that it's, quote, unclear that we got anything in return, and we're now, quote, setting ourselves up for future concessions without benefits. Keldon also highlighted that the DST isn't a made-in-Canada thing. The UK held firm and still has theirs in place while trade talks are ongoing, he said, adding that EU countries have them too. And even if those countries claimed they would repeal their DST if the OECD can agree on an approach to taxing global companies, that effort, according to Keldon, and as I mentioned earlier, is, quote, basically dead after the G7. Quote, Canada is highly dependent on big tech for consumer, commercial, and government infrastructure, Keldon said. If this is a preview of the approach we're taking to big tech, I'm not optimistic, end quote. Even a senior Liberal source told me how bad this is optically for Canada. They told me today that the way the government went about this makes Carney look like he, quote, went from Captain Canada to capitulation Carney. Yikes. But hey, at least now Jeff Bezos can really enjoy his honeymoon. Go ahead, Jeff, splurge on that room upgrade. You've earned it. Meanwhile, there's about to be around $2 billion less in Canada's coffers than there was supposed to be landing there tomorrow, so can't wait to see if we plan to try and compensate for that. By the way, I am not going to be making a video or Twitch streaming tomorrow, which I do, by the way, every Tuesday evening, so make sure you go subscribe, because I have a head that filled with snot the second I started to rest on the weekend, so. And it's technically a holiday anyway, okay? So if Canada could avoid doing anything super embarrassing for like 24 hours, that would be super cool. Until then, what do you think of all this?